What's going on, everyone? Welcome into the FantasyPros Dynasty Football Podcast presented by Reality Sports Online. My name is Kyle Yates, and I am your host, and I'm joined, as always, by Ray Garvin. Ray, how we doing tonight, brother?
Doing well, man. Had some exciting news pop off today, and I'm excited for this next installment of our superlative rankings for the wide receiver position. So excited, man. I gotta work out after this, so I'm I'm antsy. I'm antsy to work out.
Well, let's make sure that you stay on your fitness goals there, and FF Fit Club, make sure that you post that, man. I gotta make sure. You gotta get the accountability. I gotta make sure that you actually did your workout. So let's get you to that. Let's get right down to business here. Of course, the news broke today that Sam Darnold has been traded from the New York Jets to the Carolina Panthers. Now, this deal actually got a little bit more than I was expecting, honestly, for Sam Darnold. A 6th-round pick in 2021. Which, okay, not a whole lot, but then a 2nd-round pick and a 4th-round pick in 2022. So let's break this down from a dynasty perspective here, Ray. Let's talk about Sam Darnold specifically here, and then I'll kind of tee these up, and we'll just talk about the different aspects of this trade and everything that it hits. But let's talk about Sam Darnold here specifically. What does this do for Sam Darnold from a dynasty perspective for you, if anything?
Yeah, I think it definitely gives Sam Darnold life, right? It gives Sam Darnold managers a glimmer of hope to pair him with Matt Rule and Joe Brady, fantastic offensive coordinator from LSU in his 2nd season. He'll be surrounded by the best supporting cast as far as weaponry that he's ever had. So from that standpoint, I think it's good for Sam Darnold. The problem is Sam Darnold was turnover prone in college. He's been turnover prone in the NFL, and I just don't know. Definitely a stock up, but I still have question marks, and I still don't think that it's out of the realm of possibility that Carolina still goes quarterback at some point. So it probably knocks them out of the 1st-round pick category for quarterback, but I don't think the writing it's all said and done that they're prepared to move forward with Sam Darnold as their long-term starter of the future.
Right, and I think that it is definitely a stock-up situation in my mind as well. But yet it is also important to, let's manage our expectations here, right? This is still a guy who, yes, he's only 23 years old, Darnold, but yet he's still, man, from what we've seen, it's not been pretty. And, of course, we can tie that to Adam Gase, and we can tie it to the weapons that he's had and all this. But this is the situation for him to succeed with Joe Brady, like you mentioned, with the receiving weapons that he's got. It's an excellent situation for him to succeed. Let's see if he takes advantage of it. But yet, he's still a low-end QB2 in my dynasty quarterback rankings. Now, this is a stock-up situation. If you had him in Superflex leagues and you were kind of just holding that hope, yeah, you got lucky here, right? You got a situation where he falls into a better situation for fantasy football. But let's talk about the receiving weapons here in Carolina really quick. Yeah. Now, did it move any of these guys for you whatsoever? The only guy that moved for me specifically was Robbie Anderson. Now, Robbie Anderson, of course, reuniting with Sam Darnold, the quarterback that he was playing with in New York there for a couple seasons. So Robbie Anderson moved up a couple of spots for me. He was a low-end wide receiver 3. He's still in that range, but did bump up a couple of spots. But the slot receiver here is kind of where Sam Darnold has locked onto in the past. We saw it with Jamison Crowder, and Braxton Berrios was relevant for, when he got the playing time. So that role Curtis Samuel filled last year, that role is no longer there. So now does DJ Moore bump inside? Do they draft someone? Who's that going to be? But yet, for me, the only player that moved was Robbie Anderson. Anything for you here from the weapons here in Carolina with Sam Darnold coming over?
Yeah, definitely agree with you with Robbie Anderson. This is good for Robbie. He and Sam Darnold definitely had a connection when Robbie was with the New York Jets, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that slot position for Carolina. And again, I go back to Joe Brady, and I know that the offense didn't look super good at times, but I think Teddy Bridgewater is just not very good either. So this is definitely a boost to the quarterback room. But I think a player that it also breathes just a little bit of air into those sails, just a little bit of life into, is Ian Thomas as well. There were a lot of people who were excited about Ian Thomas for a couple of years now, and I believe he's going into his 3rd, 4th season. And when Sam Darnold was playing well, he did target Chris Herndon, and they had another tight end there. Ryan Griffin, I think, that made some, made some plays as well. So I know that they brought in Dan Arnold. We'll see. But I think Ian Thomas, when you're talking about the latest of late dart throws, if you can ask for Ian Thomas in a trade in a bigger package, I don't think that's a bad little bet to make, that maybe he can potentially see some volume with Sam Darnold as well.
Absolutely. Dart throw kind of filler in there in a package deal, but don't hate the call. Let's talk about New York really quick now. Obviously, this teased them up for quarterback at number 2. We all thought this was coming. We all expected it. It was like a 95% chance. Now it's a 100% chance that they are taking a quarterback, and we are going to see the 2021 NFL draft start out with quarterback, with San Francisco trading up there to number 3 overall for a quarterback. So does this do anything for you with New York? Do you want to analyze that situation at all yet? Or is it kind of, I want to wait and see who they select? Is it Zach Wilson? And then we'll talk about the fantasy implications for that.
Yeah, like you said, it's definitely going to be a quarterback, and all indications are Zach Wilson. But it's funny, I saw somebody tweet today, why do we continue to assume it's Zach Wilson? Why not Justin Fields? Why not Trey Lance? Have the Jets made any kind of, tip their hand at all that it's going to be Zach Wilson? And I think the answer to that question is no. We're assuming it's Zach Wilson, but if you ask anybody why Wilson over Fields or why Wilson over Trey Lance, I don't think anybody has any kind of proof or anything outside of maybe Adam Schefter.
It's all speculation.
It's all speculation.
Right.
So, they're going to go quarterback, but I think we just need to see which quarterback. And, odds are maybe it is Zach Wilson, but you never know.
Absolutely. We'll see, and we'll analyze that as we get to past the NFL draft, and we'll talk through that. All right, before we get into the wide receiver discussion, though, did want to just a couple of housekeeping items that I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of. The Justin Herbert signed full-size helmet giveaway has ended. The winner has been contacted. So if you are listening to this and you have not checked your email in the last 24 hours or whatever, hit the pause button there. You might have an email from us saying that you won a Justin Herbert signed helmet, so make sure that you go check your email for that. Our next giveaway is coming up here soon. Details to follow with this, but I can say that it is a Travis Etienne signed football, courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction. So we're about to see Travis Etienne enter the NFL. That would be an awesome addition to a collection there. So I'll have more details for that here on our next podcast as far as the giveaway and what all that looks like. Additionally, guys, we've been talking a lot about the draft simulator over at FantasyPros.com, and I'm just going to continue to hammer this home because mock drafts are incredibly fun. Right, Ray? I have a ton of fun going through our rookie mock drafts that we do here on the show. I've done a ton of mock drafts in my own time, and I want to make sure that people know that they can do that over at FantasyPros.com/draftwizard. It's extremely fast. You can do one in 10 to 15 minutes if it's a dynasty startup. You can do one shorter than that if it is a rookie mock draft or even a redraft. If you want to get a jump start on your 2021 redraft mock drafts, yeah, you can do that right now. It's free, costs nothing to use. It has the dynasty support, like I mentioned, and that can be found at FantasyPros.com/draftwizard. So make sure that you head over there and get your mock drafts going. All right, Ray, we did our running back evaluations. We did those 2 parts, which was awesome. Great discussion, and we're going to continue that form that we did. Got really good feedback from a lot of listeners saying that they loved the format that we did. So we're just going to carry that on right here into the wide receiver discussion. Before we get into that, though, the overall strength, the overall, just the strength of the class, what is your opinion here with the 2021 wide receiver class? Do you like how deep it is? Is it a really top-heavy class? Just kind of give me your overall view and outlook on this class before we get into our first superlative.
Yeah, I think the class is a very good wide receiver class. For fantasy purposes, I think it's quite heavy at the top, and then it trails off quite a bit. As we went through the pro day testing season with measurables and all of that, I think that there's a lot of excellent depth pieces, players who could potentially be flex position players for your dynasty rosters, for your fantasy rosters, but high end potential to be elite fantasy scorers. I think there are a couple of guys in this class, and then that's really pretty much it.
Yeah, it's also interesting, too. There aren't a lot of big guys in this class. Typically, we talked about that with our 2022 preview, where you were saying, with the guys that you mentioned, those are some big guys coming out, those prototypical wide receiver ones, right? there's not a lot of that in this class. There are a lot of slot receivers in this 2021 wide receiver class. So let's break it down here. Let's go our first superlative here. Let's go best route runner in this entire class. The guys that we have scouted, I'm up to, I think, 25 players, wide receivers that I've scouted in this class. Got a lot more to get through before the NFL draft. So best route runner, in your opinion, who is it?
It's Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver out of USC. Amon-Ra is one of the best high school wide receiver prospects that we've seen come out over the past 10 years. Army All-American. He's a product of a family of just crazy athletes, crazy work ethic. His dad, two-time Mr. Olympia. His brother, Osiris St. Brown, played wide receiver at Stanford. Equinemius St. Brown, wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers. And Amon-Ra, the youngest of the three St. Brown brothers, is by far the best NFL draft prospect to come out of that family. And he's not a blazer. He's not the biggest wide receiver. But when you talk about just fundamentally sound technician, I mean, there's video clips of St. Brown at practice just destroying defensive backs at USC with phenomenal route running. And then you see that on Saturdays at USC. I mean, he's just a phenomenal route runner. His ability to use his size as a physical wide receiver as leverage to stack defensive backs, to use the physicality on those out-breaking routes to push in on the defensive back, plant his foot on the ground and explode out for an out route or an in-breaking route. When you just watch him do those things on tape from, I played defensive back in college, and when I watch him, the thing that really sort of tipped the scale for me is every route looks the same. Every single route looks the same with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and that right there is an absolute problem for defensive backs when you don't know if the receiver's going to run deep, if he's going to stem inside, if he's going to try to post corner you, in route, out breaking route. I think Amon-Ra is the best route runner in this class.
Now, when I think of the best route runner, Amon-Ra does not come to mind for me personally, but I love this inclusion of him here because I think that he is extremely underrated. There are, you and I are big fans of his game. I've got him ranked very highly, and, we've been hyping him up, but yet you look across the industry and there are people have him going in like the third round of the NFL draft. I'm saying, hey, don't be surprised if this guy goes mid to early second round just from what he can bring to the table. Now, with Amon-Ra, do you think that he is relegated completely to a slot role in the NFL, or do you think that he has enough versatility to be able to be moved to the outside, maybe given the ball, in gadget plays or anything like that, or is he just your prototypical slot receiver, but he's obviously a little bit more bigger and physical?
No, I actually think he can play outside quite well. And if you go back to his early USC production where he had 1,000 yards in his freshman season, you see him playing in and out. Michael Pittman Jr. was there with him, not this past season, but the season before. So St. Brown is definitely a player who can play in the slot and he can play outside. I don't have any concerns about his positional versatility. I think he's just going to be where he fits on an offense, but he can play inside or outside.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I talked about it on our last, I think that was our rookie mock draft that I said, I comped him to Robert Woods and they ran an identical 40-yard dash. They're near identical size. I think that they can be utilized very, very similarly too, where you get Amon-Ra St. Brown the ball behind the line of scrimmage and let him create. I think that, just like they do with Robert Woods, Robert Woods gets those 20 carries, a year or something like that. I think St. Brown can have that same kind of impact. So big fan, love you including him here. I'm going to go Rashad Bateman. That's the wide receiver out of Minnesota. As far as the best route runner that I've seen in this class. Now, from what you see with utilizing leverage, keeping his, and it comes down to footwork a lot too, right? Where we talk about with the running backs, being able to keep your feet underneath you and then using that you have that controlled momentum to be able to shift side to side and then sink your hips in and out of your break. That is what Rashad Bateman can bring to the table. So not only does he bring you that contested catch ability, which I'm sure that we'll talk about him, at some point throughout either this episode or the next one, as far as what he can bring to the table as a contested catch receiver, go up and play above the rim. But yet he is constantly going to get open from how smart he is as a route runner, how he utilizes his leverage in and out of his breaks. easily sinking his hips to be able to create that separation. Big fan of Bateman and what he brings to the table. There are people that have got him, you look at NFL draft analysts, they've got him outside their top 7 receivers and stuff like that. I'm just like, I don't understand that whatsoever. I've got this guy as a top 15 player in this class because of how good he is as a route runner and how I think that he is just going to step onto the NFL field and contribute from day one. So Rashad Bateman here as the best route runner. Most people think about him as that contested catch guy. I'm saying, no, look at what he can bring to the table as a route runner too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. I think you touched on something. I think he's good at running routes, but I don't think that's his strength. I think his strength is, you kind of alluded to it, his football IQ and his knowledge of coverages. You see him so often settle down inside of zones, understanding what the defensive backs are going to do, utilizing that leverage, as you said. But he's a good route runner, but I think he's a smarter football player, and that allows him to get open, especially against zone coverage. But I don't hate the call, and I don't understand how anybody can have Rashad Bateman outside their top 7 wide receivers.
It's crazy, man. Yeah, I love watching that when I'm scouting. I love being able to see how smart a player is on tape and on the field, right? Because that just means that they are just going to continue to get better in the NFL, right? These players who are a little bit more raw, they don't have a great understanding of route running, how to be able to sink their hips, get in and out of breaks, this, and this. That is a complete projection to the next level because the windows get tighter, the defenders get bigger, faster, stronger, right? All these things combined where I can say, if I know that you have that football IQ, I feel very comfortable projecting you forward. And so with Rashad Bateman, I definitely see that. Let's move on here to our best hands. We're going to go best receiving ability. In case you weren't aware, it's kind of an important thing with a wide receiver, being able to catch the freaking football. So let's go best hands here. I have a feeling that you and I are going to bring up the same name.
Well, go ahead and start us off then, Yates.
Let's go with Devonte Smith, man. Let's go with Devonte Smith. You have coined him as the Slim Reaper. I freaking love that. I think with Smith, for what he is able to do at his size, regardless, whether he is 170 pounds, whether he is 160, I don't care, man. Like, what he can do is just absolutely incredible. His receiving ability, his ability to track the ball while it's in the air, his ability to go up, and I said with Bateman, play above the rim, which is surprising too. With Bateman, he's not the biggest guy, right? He just measured in way smaller than what we thought he was going to. Devonte Smith, kind of the same thing, but he's got a crazy wingspan that allows him to be able to go up. I just think that if you throw the ball Devonte Smith's way, no matter where it's at, with his catch radius, he's going to bring it in. You're never going to have to worry about Devonte Smith dropping a pass. I think that he is so incredibly reliable. So Devonte Smith here for best hands. That was a pretty easy selection for me.
Yeah, and I don't have much else to add. I mean, his hands are strong. Once the ball hits him, he's coming down with it, whether it's in the back of the end zone, on the sideline. We saw that versus Ohio State, just crazy body control and ability to extend his hands. And the one-handed grab that everyone saw versus LSU, it's just right. When the ball touches his hands, he does not drop it. And another small subtlety to best hands is when there is tight coverage and the defensive back is draped over the wide receiver and he's still able to hold and secure that ball and it's not getting punched away. That's a testament to how strong his hands are. He's got the best hands in the class.
Absolutely. Another guy that I'll mention here is just kind of an honorable mention is Elijah Moore, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss. The slot receiver here received a very, very high grade for me as far as overall hands and receiving ability. Just so sticky, man. Can just track the ball extremely well. And there were some passes there from Ole Miss that, are just so far outside of his catch radius, and he somehow brings it in. They're so inaccurate, but he finds a way to bring it in. So I'll say Elijah Moore there as kind of an honorable mention. Let's go to the best field stretcher. Now, this is obviously a very valuable role. We think of field stretchers, we think of Will Fuller, right? That's kind of the name that immediately comes to mind. As far as this guy, he was able to open everything else up for the defense. Deshaun Jackson was this guy, right? But so let's talk about best field stretcher because that can be a very valuable role for fantasy football. Best field stretcher, who do you want to bring up here?
Yeah, to me, it's Jalen Waddle by a very, very wide margin. One of my buddies, Eric Crocker, Crocker Report, he played professional football, Arena League, and had a stint in the NFL. He tweeted today that you can tell a defensive back's fear by how they play the wide receivers. And you rarely ever see a wide defensive back try to press Jalen Waddle, because if they do and they make a mistake, it's lights out. I mean, his speed, there are video clips of him racing against Henry Ruggs 2 years ago, and they were neck and neck at the finish line. It is blinding speed, suddenness, acceleration. He's got a complete different gear that, listen, I know we do it every single year, and I'm going to do it now. But I truly believe that if there is anything close to what Tyreek Hill it's Jalen Waddle. And that type of speed at the next level, it translated at Alabama, and he's a much better wide receiver than Henry Ruggs ever was at Alabama. But when you're talking about just threatening a defense down the field, that you're going to have to account for him every single play out of the fear that he gets over top of your safeties, I do not believe there is a better field stretcher in this class than one Jalen Waddle.
You see it with Tyreek Hill, and you go back and you watch film, or as you're watching that game, the announcers are constantly pointing out that the safety is constantly over the top of Tyreek Hill. That you have to dedicate 2 defenders to guarding Hill, because if you do not, you're giving up 7 points or 6 points, right? Like it's going for 6. So I think with Waddle, he has the potential, absolute potential, to do that same thing. Now, I think that he's got to improve on some route running to be able to get to that same level. He's got to improve on his release off the line of scrimmage. But again, he's my wide receiver 2 in this class, and I'm saying that. So if he does figure those things out, then with his speed, combined with his speed and athleticism, then it's just lights out. You're not going to be able to guard him. You're going to have to dedicate 2 defenders to guarding him constantly, and that just opens everything else up. So I love that you talked about him here as that best field stretcher, because he absolutely can be that for an NFL offense. I'm going to go with a name here that, when you think of field stretcher, I'd mentioned Will Fuller, Deshaun Jackson. You just mentioned Jalen Waddle. You think of pure speed. And this guy certainly has that speed, but yet combining with his size, that's Terrace Marshall Jr., the wide receiver out of LSU. At his pro day, measured in at 6'3", 205, proceeded to run a 4.38 40-yard dash. Now, I don't know if I fully believe that he ran a 4.38 necessarily, because I didn't see that level of speed on tape. Now, he's fast, of course, and can absolutely build up momentum with his long strides. But I'm going to talk about him as the best field stretcher in this class because of his speed compared with his size. A fair comp is actually MVS, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Now, Scantling, of course, has his drop issues, and let's not pretend that Terrace Marshall is one of the most sure-handed receivers in this class, but yet MVS has been very valuable for Green Bay from his ability to get open deep downfield and open things up underneath for a Devonte Adams, for Allen Lazard, and these receivers that they've had throughout his time at Green Bay. Terrace Marshall can be that same type of player where he opens everything else up underneath, because if you just mentioned it with defenders trying to come up and press Jalen Waddle, if you come up and try to press Terrace Marshall, he has the size to be able to just simply bully you off. If you're lining up a 5'11", 190-pound corner on Terrace Marshall, who's 6'3", 205, guess what? That defender's going backwards most likely, and then he has the speed to be able to capitalize on it and take the top off of defense. So I think that you're going to have to dedicate 2 defenders, right? You're going to have to constantly be thinking about that safety over the top to be able to help out that corner if you are going to go into press with Terrace Marshall. And I think that he just simply, with his speed, his size, he's going to be able to open everything else up for an NFL offense. Now, he's raw. Like, I don't have him ranked very highly because of this, because like I am a little bit more scared off of raw defenders, and I mentioned the drops. There's definitely that to factor into his tape, but yet the upside is absolutely tremendous. So Terrace Marshall, wide receiver out of LSU, as far as the best field stretcher in my opinion.
Yeah, I was a little surprised, but I don't hate it. I think it is projecting a little bit moving forward because he never really played that role. Jamar Chase was the downfield threat in 2019, and Marshall did have some deep passes this past season, but he only played a handful of games, and we really didn't see it consistently. And I don't think, from what I've seen on tape, that he creates that level of Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, even Henry Ruggs to a degree. When Henry Ruggs is on the field, like, you have to pay attention because he has
For
legit.
sure.
I don't know if Marshall has that type of true on-field speed to where an NFL defense is going to allocate, multiple defenders to him. I truly believe from day one, they may try to one-on-one Jalen Waddle, and I don't think that's going to work out very well for the defensive team that does that. I just don't see that level of speed for Terrace Marshall, but for his size, like you said, at 6'3", 205, one of the very few wide receivers in this class over 6'1" and 200 pounds, to be as fluid and as fast as he is impressive.
Yeah, and I did want to bring in a different type of player into this conversation too, because we can constantly just talk about speed, pure speed as the field stretching option. Like, I totally get that. And Jalen Waddle, absolutely, I'm not going to fight you at all on that selection. Now, my concern with and why I didn't put Jalen Waddle as the best field stretcher is because I think Waddle's going to be utilized more heavily underneath. That I don't think that he, of course he's going to be moved outside and he is going to have those 9 routes and those deep posts and stuff like that. That he will be able to open things up, occasionally, but I don't think that that's going to be how completely he's utilized. I don't think that you're going to see Terrace Marshall utilized much underneath at all. Like, that's just really not his game. I think that he is going to be that guy that you're utilizing deep downfield, and I think that as far as his projection to the next level, let me clarify that. As far as his projection to the next level, I think that is going to be his game and how he wins. So with Marshall, that's why I included him, because it is not only just his speed. I wanted to reclassify and at least carry in a different conversation of field stretching to be, yes, it can be pure speed, but yes, it also, you have to factor in that based on his size, he carries a whole other level of threat for an NFL defense. So wanted to mention Marshall there. Go ahead.
I've got to say, that was a very good counterpoint, because I think you're right. I think the Raiders kind of learned that too, right? Just sending Henry Ruggs.
Henry Ruggs is a
down the
perfect
field
example
on
of this.
9 routes is not optimal. Like, yeah, you got to it cleared stuff up for Waller, sure, but is that what you spent a top 12 pick on, is for someone just to do that? And I do think that Jalen Waddle, because when you watch him, some of those long touchdowns, I mean, trust me, he's got his fair share of deep bombs where he just blazes past people.
Oh,
but
for sure.
Those bubble screens are where he's just lethal, right? Just get it to him really, really quickly and let him do work, because he's got great acceleration. So I just want to say that's a very, very astute observation by you, because I don't think, and if an NFL team uses Jalen Waddle just on the outside to run 9 routes, it's going to waste him and it's going to crush his fantasy value.
Yeah, and I think, we can all sit here and say, well, yeah, that would be of course, why, you have to utilize them in a variety of different ways. Well, NFL teams apparently are showing that they're not that smart, with Henry Ruggs being the perfect example there. So let's knock this last one out really quick here. This is our best slot receiver. Now, I mentioned that this class is it's full of slot receivers. You can go down the list, everyone from Rondelle Moore to Kadarius Toney to you might put Tylan Wallace in the slot, Shi Smith out of South Carolina, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Elijah Moore, who else am I missing? Amari Rogers, Jalen Darden, Daz Newsome probably is going to be a slot, like Cade Johnson out of South Dakota State. Man, the list just goes on and on as far as these players that are going to be classified and relegated to a pure slot role in the NFL. But there's a best one in this class. I'm really interested to see who you're going to bring up here, because, again, there's a lot of very, very talented players. Well, let's talk about the best one, in your opinion.
Yeah, and for me, Yates, the crazy thing is there are a lot of options, a ton of options for this, but I'm going with the player who caught over 110 passes as a true freshman, over 2,000 total yards as a true freshman, just absolute slot monster. He's going to play the slot at the next level. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's Rondelle Moore, the wide receiver out of Purdue, at 5'7", 180 pounds, 4.3 40 time, ridiculous short shuttle. He's going to be a headache in the slot. Using him outside to run 9 routes is not going to be ideal.
Right.
He can do that out of the slot against this. Like, what do you do with that? An outside linebacker is too slow. A safety probably, I would dread having to play inside against him for 60, 70 plays a game. He's explosive, he's dynamic, he's shifty, he's quick, he's physical after the catch. I think he's going to cause a ton of problems inside of the slot. And for me, amongst a group of wide receivers who have a ton of slot receivers, I think he's the best one.
I'm going to go with Rondelle Moore here too, because of a lot of the same reasons you mentioned, but then also not when you think of slot receivers, and I don't know about you, but for me, typically, like I go immediately to Julian Edelman. Like Julian Edelman, when I think of a slot receiver, that is the type of guy where wins with that quick, shifty, like over the middle of the field. He's going to get popped, but he's going to get right back up and he's going to hold on to that ball through contact. That's kind of what I think about with a slot receiver, but yet with Rondelle Moore and what he can bring to the table, it's going to be so much more than that. Because not only are you going to be able to utilize him with his quick, short area quickness, but then also his speed on drag routes, on unders, and just being utilized underneath across the field. A defender, a slot corner, is not going to be able to keep up with him with 4.29 speed. But then also, if you have off-man coverage and you allow him to be able to get open on deep overs, on these in-breaking routes and things like that from the slot, to be able to be utilizing his speed. And then not only that, but getting him touches out of the backfield, like maybe even as a running back. Like he's got the size to be able to do that too. Like I think that the possibilities are endless here for an NFL team that drafts Rondelle Moore. Now the only concern is injury. Can he hold up? Because the past couple years, now they're not serious injuries, but he hasn't played a ton of games here over the past couple of seasons. So that is the only concern. But as far as what Rondelle Moore can bring to the table, I'm a big fan of him and his projection as far as being the best slot receiver. An honorable mention that I'll throw in here really quick before we get out of here is Kadarius Toney, the wide receiver out of Florida. Now, Toney has a lot of work to do. Still raw, needs a lot of refinement in his route running, but the tools are already there. You see it all the time with him on his tape, consistently just creating separation. He's got that like spinorama, slot or route that you see. I'm sure that you've seen it on Twitter. He's got that spinorama.
Route. Route.
It's a ton of fun to see. And maybe you say, okay, does that work necessarily at the NFL level? I think it will, with how quick he is. Like that, you see the tools and the traits all there to be molded. Now, there are concerns about him being a little bit older, the late breakout, this, and this, but yet I think that those are a little bit overblown for me. I've got him ranked very high in this class. So I like Kadarius Toney and his projection to the next level because he's going to fill a very, very similar role to what we just talked about with Rondelle Moore. I just like Moore just a little bit better.
Man, listen, Tony's taken a lot of heat, but all he's done since the season is over is answered the call. And for me, honestly, I understand we want younger players because in theory they last longer, but we don't know. You could be 20 and out of the league at 28. Just give me good players. And I think Tony's a far better player than the fantasy community gives him credit for. Pro Day was fantastic. I mean, he's the same size as Rashad Bateman. I was just about to talk about his pro day. Yeah. I mean, same size as Rashad Bateman, and he's faster, and he's quick, he's elusive, and if he gets the draft capital and is used in the slot like you, I think there's a very strong argument to be made that he could be the best slot receiver in this class, man. I love the honorable, and honestly, I don't even think it's honorable mention. I think he's right up there with Moore as far as what he's going to do at the next level and what he could become.
His tape is a ton of fun. His pro day, I alluded to it, 6 foot, 193 pounds, which is a big slot. That's big for a slot receiver. 40-inch vertical jump, which is a 90th percentile. 136-inch broad jump, which is a 99th percentile number.
Gosh.
Only 9 reps on the bench. Okay, yep, kind of expected there for a slot receiver, but 4.41 40-yard dash, and then a 6.88 three-cone drill, which is a 64th percentile number. So this is an incredible athlete.
And let me just, for everybody out there that's wondering, why didn't he do it earlier? He was a quarterback coming out of high school, and Florida was an absolute mess for a couple of years. So, I mean, he's just really learning the receiver position. He was a quarterback, a wildcat quarterback out of high school. He's just learning the position, man.
Yeah, and I think, I mentioned his long-term projection. I'm a big, big fan of. All right, so we talked about best route runner, best hands, best field stretcher, best slot receiver. That's going to do it for this episode. We will get to our best contested catch receiver in this class on our next episode. We've got quite a few superlatives that are left on this list, right? We're going to try to fly here at this next episode to see if we can get through it. But really good conversation. Ray, how do you feel about just your list, the guys you brought to the table, and then how do you feel about the upcoming episode, man?
And it's a good list. It's a good list, and I think the next episode will be really good to get into some of those toughest evals, favorite day 3 guys, some really actionable content that I'm looking forward to chopping it up with you, brother.
Absolutely. So make sure that you guys stick around for that because, again, we're going to get into some really interesting names here. You mentioned lowest floor, highest ceiling, toughest evaluation, day 3 wide receiver. We're going to get to it all here on that next episode. Fingers crossed. All right. I got to say a huge thank you to Reality Sports Online for sponsoring today's podcast. Make sure that you guys head over to Reality Sports Online to learn more about what they've got going on. And Ray, thank you again so much for joining me for this podcast, man. Ton of fun. Make sure you go get that workout in, brother. I'll be paying attention to Twitter to see if that come through.
Yeah, man. Hey, you have a good night, and as always, Yates, it is always good to chop it up with you, man.
Absolutely, man. All right, for Ray Garvin, I'm Kyle Yates, and we'll see you next time. Looking for useful content, fantasy-relevant information, and the data that can help your team win? Then make sure to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel. And while you're at it, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at FantasyPros so we can help you dominate your league all season long.